Is in custody. We'll be live at the scene. We'll have more of the Hong Kong high-rise fires. More than 36 people dead, nearly 300 others missing. Is bamboo scaffolding to blame? Also coming up, the evidence the US president's chief negotiator coached Russia on how to handle Donald Trump. A leaked phone call between America's chief negotiator and a close Putin advisor. We'll take you through the transcript and ask where it leaves hopes for peace. Donald Trump says Russia is giving ground diplomatically and sends envoys back to Moscow and Kyiv.
You feel like you're fighting a war on two fronts, one to get them home and one with the government to take action.
The son of a British couple locked up in Iran accuses ministers of failing to learn the lessons of Iran's hostage diplomacy. And riches from outer space, while Morocco has become a haven for meteorite hunters. That's all coming up in the world with me, Dominic Waghorn. We begin with breaking news tonight from Washington, where the White House is on lockdown after two members of the National Guard were shot dead, according to the governor of West Virginia. That's the state where the National Guard's members were usually based. US correspondent Mark Stone is at the scene. Mark, what is the latest?
Yeah, a very good afternoon to you, Dominic. Just gone 4 o'clock here in Washington, D.C. We're in Farragut Square, 1 block to the north of the White House, where it has been confirmed in the last 10 minutes that two National Guardsmen, National Guards members have been shot and killed. You can see the scene as we pan the camera around to the right in a completely cordoned off block of Washington, D.C. outside the metro station. That is where the shooting took place at around 2:15 this afternoon, so a couple of hours ago. Initially, the news from President Trump was that both of those National Guard members had been injured and were being treated in separate hospitals. But in the last 10 minutes, Dominic, we've had a statement from the governor of West Virginia, and I'll read it to you. He says, "It is with great sorrow that we can confirm both members of the West Virginia National Guard who were shot earlier today in Washington, D.C., have passed away from their injuries. These brave West Virginians lost their lives in the service of their country. We are in ongoing contact with federal officials as the investigation continues." And the statement concludes, "Our entire state grieves with their families, their loved ones, and the Guard community. West Virginia will never forget their service or their sacrifice, and we will demand full accountability for this horrific act." Now, of course, Dominic, what we don't know is the motive behind this. The president tweeted, put a message on Truth Social around about 35 minutes ago, before news had emerged that the National Guard members had died. I will read you his statement as well. He said, "The animal that shot the two National Guardsmen, with both being critically wounded and now in two separate hospitals, is also severely wounded, but regardless will pay a very steep price. God bless our great National Guard and all of the military and law enforcement. These are truly great people. I, as President of the United States, and everyone associated with the office of the presidency, am with you." President Trump, Dom, is not here in Washington at the moment. He is down in Mar-a-Lago, from where we are told he is being kept across all of the updates from here.
Mark, we should stress, obviously, that where you are, it's a busy part of downtown Washington. It's just a block or so away from the White House. Reports that the gunman was possibly shot as well. Do we know what kind of encounter it was? Was it a shootout between him and these National Guardsmen? Any sort of clearer sense of what actually went down where you are?
No, and I think that's quite surprising that we haven't had any detail at this stage about exactly what happened. We do not know if they were specifically targeted. The National Guard are on the streets of quite a number of America's cities on the orders of the president. Their deployment has been unpopular among many, but that is clearly distinct from the troops themselves being seen as unpopular. Yesterday, I saw somebody buying 3 National Guardsmen who walked into Starbucks just round the corner from here, buying them all a coffee, handing over his credit card. They are seen as popular. but their deployment by many, especially in a democratic city like this, is seen as unnecessary. They are here on the face of it to fight crime, to help fight crime. Trump was saying just yesterday how crime is at a much lower level in Washington, D.C., but they've also been used to do a lot of non-law enforcement activities. This park, in fact, as recently as 6 months ago, there were a lot of homeless people in this park. It was quite dirty. It has since been cleared up. It's a separate question where those homeless people have been moved to, but the National Guard have played their part in doing just that. I should say, as we pan round, Dom, there is a small set of microphones being set up here at the moment, so we do expect perhaps there might be some statement. Yeah, there should be a statement from somebody, we're not quite sure who, at some point in the next few minutes perhaps. So we'll stay across that for you and bring it to you as and when it happens. But as I say, this is fast moving and I think profoundly serious, given the context of the deployment of the National Guard here, the geography, how close it is to the White House, the controversy around Trump deploying the National Guard. It is a very serious incident indeed, Dom.
Mark, as you say, we've heard from the President, we've heard from the Vice President, the Governor of West Virginia. How are local people reacting to what's happened in the city? Obviously, Washington, no stranger to gun crime, but this must be profoundly shocking, seeing 2 men in uniform being shot and now known to have died.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll be upfront with you, Dom. I haven't had a chance to speak to a huge number of locals at the moment. Given the location, there are so many media here anyway. That given the location, there are a lot of people here, and as you can see, it's kind of a free-for-all at the moment. So I haven't spoken to many people, but it's true to say that a shooting in the heart of Washington, D.C. is extremely rare. There are parts of this city that have a crime problem for sure. The centre of the city is certainly not one of those.
Mark Stone in Washington, we'll leave it there for now, but we'll come back to you as the story develops and whatever happens in that news conference, whoever's going to be speaking there, we'll tune back in when that happens. But for now, on to another developing story today. At least 36 people have been killed and nearly 300 others are missing in Hong Kong after a fire spread from one high-rise to the next. Local media outlets have reported that 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter. Well, this is the scene in the city more than 12 hours after the blaze first started. It's not clear yet what started it, but the flames that you can still see there are being fanned by bamboo scaffolding, which the government started to phase out earlier this year because of safety concerns. Emma Birchley has the latest.
Flames lick high into the night sky over Hong Kong as 7 towering apartment blocks burn. Trapped inside, residents who couldn't escape. Just how many is still unclear. It's thought the blaze started on bamboo scaffolding being used in major renovations of the vast, densely packed complex. The temporary structure and netting escalating the spread, first within the 32-storey block and then beyond, with windy conditions not helping. More than 200 fire engines and ambulances were sent to the scene. But with the inferno raging, firefighters have faced a huge challenge. And among the dead, at least one of their own.
Debris and scaffolding of the affected buildings are falling down, so pose additional danger to our frontline personnel. Besides, the temperature inside the buildings concerned are very high, so it's quite difficult for us to enter the building and go upstairs to conduct firefighting and rescue operation.
The fire began in the middle of the afternoon. One witness spoke of hearing a loud noise at 2:45 p.m. and seeing the blaze erupt. It was only earlier this year the government said it would start phasing out the use of bamboo scaffolding for public projects over safety concerns. Those who escaped were clearly in shock as others were rushed to hospital. The complex is made up of 2,000 apartments, thought to be home to 4,800 people. It's situated in the northern Tai Po district, close to mainland China. Temporary accommodation has been set up for those who've lost their homes and everything they own. They will have no choice but to start again. But too many who lived here have died here, their loved ones left behind to mourn. Emma Birchley, Sky News.
Let's turn now to one key question at the heart of high-stakes efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Whose side is America's lead negotiator Steve Witkoff on? It's a valid one after leaks from a phone call between him and Vladimir Putin's top foreign policy advisor. Witkoff spent a lifetime doing real estate deals, often involving Russian money. And then this past year as Donald Trump's chief negotiator, despite zero experience in diplomacy. In the leaked transcript, he's heard offering advice on how Vladimir Putin can get his way with President Trump, and saying the best way of getting a deal is Ukraine giving up its strategically important Donetsk region. That is a red line for Kyiv.
That's a standard thing, because he's got to sell this to Ukraine. He's got to sell Ukraine to Russia. That's what a deal maker does. You got to say, look, they want this. You've got to convince them with this. That's a very standard form of negotiation.
So that's Donald Trump there saying nothing to see here. But the knives are out in Washington with calls for Witkoff to go. So can Steve Witkoff really stay on his job? And what he does, is there any hope of progress towards peace? We'll discuss that tonight after this report from our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett.
On the battlefield, they've been uncompromising. And away from it, there's still a similar approach.
Hey, hello, everybody. How are you?
Despite Donald Trump's optimism,
Well, they're making concessions. They're big concessions as they stop fighting and they don't take any more land.
there's no sign that Moscow will soften its stance and agree to the latest peace plan.
Can you shed more light on Donald Trump's claim that Russia has agreed to make concessions? Is that true?
The various versions of this plan are a matter for negotiation. There can be no talk of any concessions or surrendering our approach.
Vladimir Putin certainly doesn't look like he's in a rush to sign a peace deal. He's been in Kyrgyzstan, enjoying a red carpet welcome. To Europe, though, the Kremlin's conduct is still a red rag.
Right now, we see zero indication that Russia is ready for a ceasefire. Russia is not winding down its military machine, but ramping it up.
But there are questions, too, over America's approach to the peace talks after leaked details of a phone call between US envoy Steve Witkoff and Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov last month. In the transcript published by Bloomberg, the American gives advice on how to court Donald Trump. A call from Putin, he suggests, to congratulate him on the peace plan for Gaza. I would make the call, Witkoff says, and just reiterate that you congratulate the president on this achievement, that you respect that he is a man of peace. Ushakov replies, I will discuss that with my boss and then I come back to you, okay? Witkoff again. Maybe he, Putin, says to President Trump, you know, Steve and Yuri discussed a very similar 20-point plan to peace, and that could be something that we think might move the needle a little bit. I know what it's going to take to get a peace deal done. Donetsk and maybe a land swap somewhere.
This is an extraordinary revelation which appears to confirm what many in Ukraine and Europe have long feared, that the US is not an honest broker in its pursuit of peace. Instead, it appears to have been stacking the board in Moscow's favour.
Russia claims the leak was an attempt to undermine relations with the US.
To hinder us, probably. It's unlikely this was done to improve relations, which are being restored with difficulty, restored through this sort of contact, including on the phone.
Next week, the contact will be in person. Witkoff is due in Moscow for more talks with Vladimir Putin on the latest peace proposals. Given Russia's response so far, he may be leaving empty-handed. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Well, our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes is in Kyiv tonight. Deborah, this is an astonishing set of revelations and leaks. How are Ukrainians responding to claims that Trump's point man on Ukraine might actually be batting for Moscow?
Well, as Ivor sort of said in his report there, the Ukrainians that I've spoken to since arriving here earlier today have really sort of shrugged and said that this is just confirmation of what they had suspected, that Witkoff did favour, has always been favouring the Russian side, and they're just glad that the leaked conversation now means that it's there in black and white for the American public, the American people to see as well, and to make up their own mind when it comes to whether or not there is a fair negotiation happening here. And just more broadly as well, I was speaking to a Ukrainian soldier that I know that's been fighting since the beginning of this full-scale war nearly 4 years ago now. And I was asking him, what does he make of all these, this latest whirlwind of talk about a peace deal? Remember, it was tomorrow that Donald Trump set as the deadline for when Volodymyr Zelensky would have to come up with an answer to his initial peace proposal. And this soldier just said to me that people really just shrug their shoulders and say, whatever, let's see how this plays out.
Give us a sense also, because in this recording we have Witkoff talking about Donetsk and saying that that could be at the heart of the deal, just handing it over to Russia. Remind us why that is unacceptable to Ukrainians.
Well, it's unacceptable because that area, as you know, has been the target of Russian forces, not just since 2022, but since 2014, when Russia first invaded Ukraine. It took Crimea, that peninsula, and then Russia-backed forces have been battling against the Ukrainian military for control of the Donbass in the east. The Ukrainians lost many soldiers during that period, even up until the full-scale invasion. But then since 2022, there has been large-scale, full-scale war across the whole country, but in particular in the east. Many lives lost, soldiers right now fighting to try to keep hold of key towns. You'll know the names like Pokrovsk, for example, Chaziv Yar, near to Bakhmut. These are areas that the Ukrainians have fought hard to try to keep. So the idea that their president or the president could even think of handing over that territory, that is something that many see as unacceptable. However, there are those that do realise that there needs to be an end to this war in some way, and war inevitably does have to end. If there isn't a complete military victory, it has to end with some kind of compromise.
Absolutely, Deborah. Thank you very much for your update from Kyiv. We can go now to Yuri Sak, who is former advisor to the Minister of Strategic Industries in Ukraine. So, Mr. Sak, what's your reaction? I mean, Deborah was saying that Ukrainians have kind of got used to everything happening, and the fact that Steve Witkoff has been caught on tape, apparently trying to coach the Russians on how to get their way with Donald Trump isn't really surprising anybody. But what was your personal reaction when you heard about these revelations?
Good evening. I must say that me, as well as millions probably of other Ukrainians, we have not been surprised. But we have to also understand that this peace process is a very complex procedure with a lot of moving parts. So nobody is surprised that, Stephen Witkoff, as the US president's special envoy, whose mission is actually to facilitate the negotiating process, that he's trying to exert maximum efforts to bring the parties to the table. President Donald Trump is a president which I think every other leader in the world who goes to meet him needs coaching. So in many ways, we as Ukrainians, we are focused on moving this process forward. And we look forward to President Zelensky meeting with Donald Trump, hopefully after Thanksgiving next week. And that will be a much more important issue and milestone.
So that's interesting. You're saying actually that it kind of makes sense that Witkoff should have been coaching the Russians on how to deal with Donald Trump to kind of make the meeting work effectively. That's kind of the opposite of what you might expect a Ukrainian to say. I mean, many people might think the Ukrainians might be horrified that this man who's meant to be an honest broker seems to be kind of stacking the pitch against Ukrainians, as we heard Ivor Bennett say there in Moscow.
What matters is the result. I think by now, the Americans understand very well that Russia doesn't have any intention to end this war. Yet the White House exerts efforts and wants to make it happen. We have seen the futile meeting in the Anchorage, which led to nothing. So I think White House doesn't want to repeat the same mistake. And, we mustn't sort of listen just literally to what is being said on those phone calls. We have to, I think, step back and look at it as the White House's efforts to actually achieve some results. We hope they succeed.
I mean, is there a sense, though, that this is the beginning, at least, of a process, however messy it seems, however chaotic and however problematic it is, with this initial peace plan possibly being sort of dictated from Moscow? That's certainly the claim. At least it's the beginning of a process that could sort of be moulded and push one direction and the other, but it could end up gathering a kind of momentum towards some kind of resolution of this war.
This actually is the biggest question, and we have always been very skeptical about the potential of this peace process. Nevertheless, our Ukrainian team is working 24/7 to ensure that some progress is made. But look, every time this peace process begins to look like there's a possibility, there's a light in the end of the tunnel, Russians come out and even their officials denounce these efforts, openly. Like, look at what their Ministry of Foreign Affairs have said today of Russia. They said, well, we will not step back, and there will be no, on their part, there will be no concessions made. So that's a very irreconcilable position. So this is why we believe that this peace process has only one chance of succeeding. If Ukraine and our US partners and our European partners, if we agree on a sensible formula of a just and lasting peace, then that formula will have to be forced on Russia. And for this to happen, the US has to leverage more sanctions, more pressure on the Kremlin. So do the European countries.
Yuri Sak, thank you very much for your take on this extraordinary leaked recording. Thanks for your insights there on what is an extraordinary story that's still developing. We go now to Anne Applebaum, who's a staff writer at The Atlantic magazine, who's covered the war in Ukraine extensively. What do you make there, Anne, of what a Ukrainian was saying, which was actually, in a sense, that it makes sense for diplomats to try and help the leaders of other countries to kind of work out how to get on the best side of Donald Trump? Effectively, he was saying there really to make a success out of this potential meeting.
So that was not how I interpreted the conversation between Steve Witkoff and Yuri Ushakov. What it sounded to me, rather, was, especially if you look at the timing of the call, that he was seeking to prevent Donald Trump from working out a deal with Zelensky. Remember, the call was made on October 14th. Zelensky was supposed to meet President Trump on the 17th. And the purpose of the call was to get Putin to call Trump in order to spoil that meeting, which was duly spoiled. In that meeting, Trump had been talking about giving cruise missiles to Ukraine, had been talking about intensifying sanctions, and somehow the call with Putin persuaded him that there was a different kind of peace plan on offer. And so it looks rather to me like Witkoff was disturbing and perhaps undermining the peace process, remembering, actually, as your previous guest was saying, this war will end only when the Russians stop fighting. And the Russians have to be persuaded to stop fighting. They have to be put pressure to stop fighting. And the pressure can come from Europe, which it is. It can come from the Ukrainians, which it is every day. And it can come from the United States. And Putin's game has been to separate the United States from Europe, to somehow peel off Donald Trump as a way to give him an easier path towards the way he wants to finish the war, which is by occupying or destroying or undermining Ukraine and declaring victory.
I mean, that may be Putin's. Sorry to interrupt, because this breaking story in Washington, we don't have a lot of time, but it'd be good to get to the heart of this. I mean, that may be Putin's sort of game here. But what do you think Witkoff's game is, and what's Trump's game? Because, in a sense, if they're going to help the Russians, then you could see the defeat of Ukraine eventually. Then Trump looks like a loser. That would be a failure worse than the Afghan withdrawal that Joe Biden suffered, wouldn't it? So, what do you think Trump and Witkoff actually want out of this process?
So Witkoff seems to be very interested in negotiating business deals with Russia. Remember, that was a big part of the document that was released last week. He is known to be involved with U.S. companies and Russian companies. They're already talking about what they might do together. His document also included an idea that the U.S. would somehow take control of the $100 billion of billions of dollars of Russian frozen assets that are actually in European hands. So it's not even clear how that would happen. He may have been manipulated by Putin. He speaks of his deep respect for Putin in that call, and he's done so at other times. He's never been a diplomat before. He's very impressed by his meetings with important, powerful people. I don't really know what is his goal. Trump seems to be affected by whoever he last spoke to. And I think Witkoff knew this, which is why he wanted Putin to call Trump and disrupt his meeting with President Zelensky.
Just to put to you what J.D. Vance said, but also picked up by sort of well-respected Russia watcher Mark Galliotti this week, saying that actually Vance was right to say it is a fantasy to say Ukraine can actually ever win this war, even with American help, and that what is required is some kind of compromise, some kind of negotiated compromise. Well, what do you make of that claim?
It depends what you mean by win. Ukrainians need to end the war in a way that maintains their sovereignty, gives them defensible borders, and gives them security guarantees. If they can get that, they win. And then we can go on and have an argument about exactly where the border should be and how Ukraine can get tens of thousands of kidnapped children back. But until Russia stops fighting, there isn't a negotiation to have. And we need to force Russia to stop fighting. And Witkoff seems to be playing a game that, whether he knows it or not, maybe he doesn't realize it, I'll give him that benefit of the doubt, is allowing Russia, encouraging Russia to continue the war.
Anne Applebaum, thank you very much for your insights, an intriguing but rather perplexing twist to this story, and great to get your take on it. Well, we're going to cross back now to Washington after the shooting of 2 National Guard members who we now know have died since the shooting. US correspondent Mark Stone is at the scene. What's the latest you have for us, Mark?
Well, an extraordinary U-turn by the governor of West Virginia, Patrick Morrisey. He was the one who announced about half an hour ago or so that the 2 National Guardsmen who are from West Virginia had died. He has since put an update saying we're now receiving conflicting reports about the condition of our 2 Guard members, and will provide additional updates once we receive more complete information. Our prayers are with these brave service members, their families, and the entire Guard community. So they're a message which aligns with what the president said about 45 minutes ago, which is that these 2 National Guard soldiers were injured and were in separate hospitals, that the gunman as well, so the president said, was injured and was receiving treatment, but is in custody. We're awaiting now a news conference. You can see the microphones have been placed here. There are officials here from the department, the police department of DC, the mayor's office as well. Muriel Bowser is the mayor. We may see her. We may see officials from the police giving us an update. Of course, that will be the moment where we get much more clarity on what happened here, a block from here, in fact, less than a block, just the other side of Farragut Square where we are now, a block or so from the White House, 2:15 this afternoon. A gunman opened fire, shot, and we think injured 2 National Guard members. And we're not sure if anyone else was injured. We're not sure what the motive was. The context, Dom, as we were discussing earlier, is that the National Guard has been deployed on the orders of President Trump to quite a few cities around the country, on the face of it, to fight crime, but they've been doing other things as well. We don't know if they were specifically targeted in this shooting, but it's a very, very serious incident indeed. The president is in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, from where he has been kept up to date. Pete Hegseth is the Defense Secretary, the Secretary of War, as the department is now known. He has said in the last few minutes that 500 additional National Guard will now be deployed to Washington, D.C. as a consequence of this shooting.
And I guess, nerves which will have been truly sort of ruffled by this in DC. This sort of confusion, these conflicting reports are not going to do anything to sort of calm the tension that the shooting would have caused in Washington.
Dom, I lost you there. I didn't quite catch the question. I mean, the
confusion we're getting from the authorities must be can't be doing much to calm nerves and the tensions caused by the shooting in Washington.
Yeah, for sure. And it's certainly the case that if they can't ascertain clearly before they publicise it whether or not those people who were shot have died or not. It does raise the question, are we absolutely sure that the gunman has been taken into custody? But there's been no clarification on that, so we must go with what the president said, which is that he has been taken into custody and is also injured. But I'm sure all of that will become clear over the course of the next few minutes as we get an update from the authorities here in the heart of Washington.
Mark, thank you very much. We'll leave it there. Clearly a fast-moving story, and when we get a clearer picture about what's happening in Washington, we'll get back to you. Thank you very much. Well, still to come on The World, a renewed call to bring home a British couple detained in Iran. We'll hear from their son and the husband of former detainee Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force. It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, DC.
Welcome back. Today I've been speaking to two men who've lived through the terror of their loved ones being locked up in Iran. Richard Ratcliffe's wife, Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, was arrested in 2016 and accused of trying to overthrow the state. She was held for nearly 6 years before her release. Well, Richard's been offering support to Joe Bennett, whose mother and stepfather, Lindsay, and Craig Foreman were arrested in Iran in January while on a motorbike trip from Europe to Australia. They're accused of espionage, a charge which the couple and their family deny. Today, Richard and Joe told me that the British government has failed to learn the lessons in the past and that sitting and waiting, as they both have been advised by the Foreign Office, is not good enough. Have a listen to our conversation.
For 6 or so months, we were told that quiet diplomacy, to keep quiet, to trust that the government are doing what they're doing and everything's doing it behind closed doors. Didn't see any movement. And to be fair, the one thing that really triggered us going public was the 12-day war. At that point, they were due to be moved to Evin, which was subsequently bombed, and we didn't know where they were. Quite simply, the government had lost track of them. There was nobody on the ground to locate them. Luckily, we found out they hadn't been transferred. They were still in Karchak, but that period of time of not knowing was the worst of the whole 11 months that we've endured, because you are just constantly thinking the worst and you've got no way of clarifying it.
And what's the latest now? What are you hearing from your own government, but also anything from the Iranians at all?
I mean, from the government side, they've been to court now 3 times, both separately, different amount of times. Sometimes we're organised, others were whisked away. But we're being told, you know, there's this policy to kind of sit and wait and ride out the judicial process. And at the moment, they're in limbo. And that's how it feels, is that we've got 2 states that are just at stalemate, waiting for one to make a move.
And you've been able to talk to your mother, though. I mean, what have you been able to say to each other, and what's that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, so she did a hunger strike. They both did a hunger strike recently in the last couple of weeks, and they were at their wits' end. You know, it was a big cry for help because they'd been promised to be able to see each other, but also to call family. And that hadn't happened. And the first call I got from my mum, spirits were very low. You could tell in her voice she was broken, very, very emotional. And she was on sort of day 5 of the hunger strike.
What was that like for you to hear that in your mother's voice?
To hear the person that means the most to you in the world suffering is the most horrific experience I can share, to be honest with you. She's my source of strength and inspiration, always has been since I was a kid. And you know, for once it was probably roles reversed. I felt like the parent at this point, right? In trying to keep calm and reassure and say, keep your strength, you know, and not telling her what to do because it's her own body. But I was very concerned that she wasn't eating and putting herself through more turmoil, right? Because she's already enduring enough.
So let's bring Richard in here, because obviously you've been through that, of course, as well. It reminds me so much of what you said to me over the years when Nazanin was incarcerated. Talking to her over the phone was a roller coaster for you as well. What do you say to Joe, I mean, to deal with the emotions of his ordeal, but also how he deals with the government's, because you've, of course, been advising him as well, haven't you?
Yeah, it brings back all sorts of memories. And I do remember, actually, sort of, in Nazanin's case, those early months where we don't know what's going on, we fear the worst. Sometimes our fears aren't, you know, it's worse than that, sometimes it's better than that. But I do remember the coldness of her on the phone when she was on hunger strike and how distant and feeling like, gosh, the powerlessness, what can we do to keep her going? And in terms of advice, I mean, there isn't one size fits all. Different, you know, our journey was our journey, Joe's journey will be his. But I know, for me, the more sunlight there was, the more the government justified or had to justify what on earth they were doing, because it looked to me for a long time like they weren't doing very much at all. And it was very opaque language about raising concerns and so on. And
you'd hope the British government and the Foreign Office have learnt a lot from your ordeal. Joe, do you think that's the case? Are they doing enough for you to help you with what's going on?
In all honesty, no. There's too many similarities to Richard and Nazanin's case, which are for the worse. You know, it is that passiveness to subdue what you're saying. And it's just taking accountability. I just don't feel like that's what they're doing. It's that they themselves are being very passive. You know, they've got 2 UK citizens that are accused of spying for the British state, but then not coming out and defending them and calling it for what it is. You know, that's, I think, the biggest thing for me, is that you need to stand up for your citizens, you know, and call it out. It's arbitrary detention, quite clearly it's almost hostage-taking at this point. Well, it is hostage-taking in my eyes.
I mean, the Foreign Office has said in the past that they don't want to give too much, and they don't want you to give too much currency to Lindsay and Craig and to Nazanin in the past, and raising too much of a hullabaloo about it actually makes the other side want to keep them for longer. Does that kind of convince you at all? Is there any justification?
Not at all, no. I mean, why wouldn't I want to raise the case, right? It's my mum and my stepdad, and I want them home desperately, so whatever I've got to do to make that happen, I'm going to. And the thing that really annoys me about what they say in that sense is that they're out there, if they're on charges of shoplifting, potentially that's understandable. Let's see the court of law, let's go through it if they've been caught of some wrongdoing. They haven't, and they've been accused of espionage, which is state-level political charges, right? They're not spies, it's quite simple.
Richard, we've, as you referring to, the TV series is out now about your story and Nazanin's story. Do you think that will have an effect as well? Sometimes drama, more than journalism, actually does have an effect on government. And what's it been like for you to kind of, I guess, relive what you went through by watching it on screen? Yeah, it's tough to revisit it. We all like to remember the good times, and it's tough, those early days. And anyone that's watched it, it's, the last episode's nice, but the first episode's full on. You can see me getting a bit triggered by some of the things that Joe's saying, but actually the drama, where it's our story, comes to it very strongly. So Nazanin, for example, didn't want to watch it. Like, I was the one that did the checks to check, how accurate it was. Yeah, it does bring back some tough times. But you're right, the reason for doing it was hopefully as a warning, that people would learn the lessons, that this is what we went through. We went through this because the Iranian state is the way it is, and it does just pluck people from obscurity and use them. And we did it also because the British government, in our case, didn't step up, didn't protect, and you'd hope there would be, a learning of the lessons. So do I think the government has learned the lesson? Well, the government, when they came into power, made all these promises about they were going to establish a hostage envoy, they were going to put a right to constant protection in law so that we would have a fair treatment. Hasn't happened yet. And it does feel to me that I'm, hearing too many echoes of our experience in the experience of Joe's family and others. I remember, Richard, you saying to me, I said to you, how do you actually cope with this? Because you had extraordinary courage and great courage to be able to actually relive it watching the TV series. But you said you keep it up until sometimes you go home and then you kind of fall apart for a while. So exactly that. I mean, as Joe said, I would cope in compartments. So I'd do this thing, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't like to watch things back. And that would work for a while. And then there are days where the wheels come off. And you just have to accept we're not, we can all step into battle mode, but we're not built for battle forever. And to just, be kind to yourself. I'm sure that helps, Joe.
Massively. Yeah, it does. And I think it's the right point. Is because some days I feel like I'm winning the battle, right? And other days I feel like I'm being pummeled. You have to be present every day. I let myself get upset because they're natural emotions. I get angry. I get frustrated. I cry. I laugh sometimes because I look back at memories. I think all of those emotions are completely normal.
And what's the latest about what you know for both of them? They're not with each other, are they? They're being held separately. What do we know about their health, their welfare?
Yeah, I mean, so they did get to see each other on Sunday, but when they got to see each other, they're in a room which is, it's barred cells, it's dirty sheets, there are cockroaches in the room. This isn't the Ritz or anything like that. So, although it's nice they can be in each other's company, it's not where you'd want to choose to be in each other's company, right? And I suppose the good news, though, is that that it has ended well. The story ended well for Richard, and hopefully it will for you as well. Does that keep you going? Yeah, absolutely. It's the hope that keeps you going, right? There is hopefully a happy ending, which I definitely think there is going to be a happy ending at some point. But I just, I'm hoping we can learn lessons, and that it isn't 5-6 years down the line when that happy ending comes. I'll take it whenever it comes, but I'd like it to be a lot sooner than that.
Two very courageous men. Well, next up, something from beyond this world. Now, the vast deserts of Morocco have become a treasure hunter's hotspot for meteorites.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Is it a draw? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children? Great to see you. Does your government owe them an apology? The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness? on the part of Iran.
No, no, no.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power. It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing. As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News. I want them to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
Well, we're going to cross over now to Washington, where two National Guardsmen were shot. Their exact condition is not known. Reports initially that they were killed, but now we think they may only have been critically injured. We're hoping for clarification, and we're watching pictures of a press conference that's being set up there. Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, on the right there. Kash Patel, the head of the FBI.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kash Patel, FBI Director.
Kicking off, it sounds like.
We're here to brief you on the tragic events that happened today at approximately 2:15 local time in Washington, D.C., where two of our brave members of the National Guard and the Department of War were brazenly attacked in a horrendous act of violence. They were shot. They're in critical condition. As you can see behind me, we have assembled the full force of both the federal and state and local law enforcement agencies to bring bear all of our resources to make sure we find the perpetrators responsible for this heinous act. And make no mistake, they will be brought to justice. Since this is an assault on a federal law enforcement officer, this will be treated at the federal level as an assault on a federal law enforcement officer. The FBI will lead out on that mission with our interagency partners, to include the Department of Homeland Security, Secret Service, ATF, DEA, and we're thankful for the mayor's assistance in this matter, the Metropolitan Police Department and their skills in investigating homicides and gun shootings in this city is exceptional. We will work together collaboratively because this is a matter of national security, because it's a matter of pride. President Trump has been informed. We've been in contact with the White House. We will shortchange the American public with no resources to make sure we find and safeguard our nation's capital right here in Washington, D.C., and bring anyone responsible for this heinous act of violence to justice. I would lastly like to add to the American public and the world, please send your prayers to those brave warriors who are in critical condition and their families. They are here serving our country. They are here protecting everyday Americans and citizens around the world in our nation's capital. They are the heroes of this day, and we must remember them on this day and every day, and their families and the sacrifice they have made. I will now turn it over to Chief Carroll of the Metropolitan Police Department. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Carroll. I'm the Executive Assistant Chief here at the Metropolitan Police Department. At approximately 2:15 this afternoon, members of the D.C. National Guard were on high visibility patrols in the area of 17th and I Street Northwest, when a suspect came around the corner, raised his arm with a firearm and discharged it at the National Guard members. The National Guard members, there were other members that were in the area. They were able to, after some back and forth, able to subdue the individual and bring him into custody. Within moments, members of law enforcement in the area were also able to assist and bring that individual into custody. At this time, as the director mentioned, the National Guard members are being treated at a local hospital. DC Fire and EMS responded to the scene to provide first aid for those individuals and transport them to a local hospital. The suspect in this case was also transported for treatment at a local hospital. Madam Mayor?
I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C., and I, too, want to send my thoughts and prayers to the families of the guardsmen and to the guardsmen who are in critical condition in a local hospital. I am joined by members and leadership from the D.C. National Guard, from the West Virginia National Guard, United States Secret Service, Deputy Mayor Pia, Fire Chief Donnelly, and Metro's General Manager Randy Clark, and we join with the FBI Director in ensuring that MPD investigates, the U.S. Attorney prosecutes this case to the fullest extent of the law. I've had the opportunity to brief U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, who was speaking to the president when I called, as well as the United States Attorney Pirro, who assured me that this case will have her office's complete attention.
Mayor, was there any other suspect?
Chief?
Sure. So no, at this time, there was no indication that there was any other suspect. The one suspect that was involved in this incident, they were shot during the interaction, and they were transported to the hospital for treatment.
Mayor, does this validate the need for the National Guard here in D.C.?
What we know, Andrea, is that this is a targeted shooting. One individual who appeared to target these guardsmen, that individual has been taken into custody.
Mayor, can you tell us any more details on the condition of the two National Guardsmen and whether or not anyone else was injured? And a quick question follow-up for the FBI Director. You said that we'll make sure we find the perpetrators for this act. So just to clarify, the person believed to be responsible is in custody and there are no other suspects.
Sure, so I can start out. Again, Chief Carroll from MPD. So both of the individuals, the guard members, they are in critical condition in a local hospital at this time being treated. At this point, we have no other suspects. We have reviewed video from the area. It appears, like I said, to be a lone gunman that raised a firearm and ambushed these members of the National Guard, and he was quickly taken into custody by other National Guard members and law enforcement members.
Have you got any sense of motive?
No, at this time, obviously, we're very in the preliminary stages of investigation. There's a lot of things, a lot of agents that are here from various federal agencies, law enforcement agencies. We have the full power of the FBI and our federal partners here in the task force. So we're looking at all those different aspects, but we don't.
Were the
have
National
any
Guardsmen armed, sir?
The National Guardsmen that were shot, I'm told they were armed.
Did they get off shots?
At this time, that's part of the preliminary investigation.
Do we know who shot the suspect, allegedly?
Sure. So how the suspect was apprehended, as I said, the individual, the suspect came around the corner. He immediately started firing a firearm at the two National Guard members. So at that time, there were other National Guard members that were in the area. They heard the gunfire. They actually were able to intervene and to kind of hold down the suspect after he had been shot on the ground until law enforcement got there within moments.
And he was shot by a National Guardsman, you think?
At this point, we're still investigating exactly who shot that individual. It's not clear at this time.
Were there D.C. policemen in the area?
We don't know what kind of weapon. There was D.C. police. It happened right in front of the Metro, although there is no indication that the perpetrator was on the Metro. So there's Metro Transit Police in the area, and obviously being on 17th Street by the White House, Uniformed Division of Secret Service were in the immediate area as well.
And do you know what kind of weapon the alleged perpetrator used?
We do not know at this time. It's still under investigation.
We're going to be able to take a couple more.
Has been able to question the suspect, or is his condition so severe that you haven't been able to have a conversation?
Sure. Again, so as I said, we're very preliminary in the investigation, so we're looking into all aspects of who the individual is, his connections. At this time, he's still in the hospital receiving treatment.
And I would just like, hang on, I would just like to add, the reason that this suspect is in custody is because of the bravery of the men and women of the National Guard who responded due to their extensive training to secure American lives today. There was not any further injury and any further shootings. We should highlight the fact that the men and women of law enforcement, the interagency, the Department of War, and the National Guard executed their training with great precision today and prevented an even greater tragedy from befalling us. These National Guardsmen are heroes, and we must pray for their safety and their speedy recovery. And as the Chief said, we are in the preliminary stages of this investigation. We will run down every single lead, every piece of evidence This is the power of the U.S. government at its best at the state, local, and federal level. That is why this interagency group is standing behind us to assure America and the world that we will continue to keep D.C. safe. And thankfully, we have Metropolitan Police Department, the National Guardsmen, and federal agents, and the Department of Justice and an Attorney General willing to prosecute the mission to keep Americans safe. And President Trump has rightly stated that this heinous act will be investigated, and he has thanked the National Guardsmen and women and the men and women of law enforcement.
Did the suspects say anything at the time? Why did the West Virginia governor say that they've been killed? Was anyone else shot?
Okay, so that was an interagency press conference, as they called it. So Muriel Bowser, the Washington, D.C. mayor, and Kash Patel, the FBI director, amongst others, addressing the media in the wake of the shocking shooting in downtown Washington. 2 National Guardsmen shot, originally thought to have been shot dead, but now known to be critically injured. They're being treated in hospital, and the gunman who attacked them is also being treated in hospital, taken into custody. Not a lot of clarity there, but Muriel Bowser calling it a targeted shooting, and Kash Patel paying tribute to the heroism of the shot National Guardsmen, but also the law enforcement officers who came to their aid, hoping to get more clarification. The shooting, of course, happening on the eve of Thanksgiving in Washington. It was condemned by American President Donald Trump, who called the attacker an animal, and also by the American Vice President. That's it for us now. Back tomorrow at 9 o'clock with more world news. That's it for now, though.